Okay, colleagues, it is 3:15 by my watch, and so I will begin by notifying members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of council that these meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. I'll ask if there is any declaration of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof. Madam Clerk, please note that none was noted. We have no minutes to accept. This is a special meeting of council called for the receipt of a report that was prepared on our building and planning. I'm just going to go over a couple things at the beginning of the meeting, and then I'm going to turn it over to our deputation. So first of all, I just want to note that today is the culmination of a significant amount of work, the completion of the building and planning services review, and the final report to council. It is important, I believe, to remember that this is only part of our journey. We have identified in this report a number of challenges and opportunities, and that the final leg of our journey needs to be the expeditious implementation of what has been laid out. After I finish making some opening remarks, I'm going to proceed in the following manner. I'm going to ask for performance concepts for Todd to make a presentation outlining the key items that he sees in the report. I'm then going to ask the Deputy Mayor to outline, if she chooses, some of the work specifically that the steering committee undertook as part of this process. I will then provide each of the council members who were not on the steering committee time to ask questions and or provide comments about the report's contents, and I will give the consultant time to respond to any of those questions. I'm then going to return to the Deputy Mayor for her comments regarding the report. I also understand the Deputy Mayor has a motion to make, and after she does that, I will look for a seconder. I then am going to make some of my own general comments about the report. I then will proceed to a discussion on the motion, and then we will dispose of it in that manner. In turning it over to Todd, I just wanted to say a few words of appreciation. First, to the members of the steering committee who worked very hard at guiding this process. Although we will receive the minutes of their last meeting at our upcoming council meeting later today, one of 4 meetings that we're doing, I wanted to note at their last meeting that they passed 2 motions for the attention of council. The first was an endorsement of the draft building and planning review report, the one that you have received, and the second was a recommendation that council do a mid-term implementation, mid-report plan implementation, a checkup with a third party. I would also like to thank the staff who supported the committee and our consultants. And I would like to thank all the residents who participated in the consultation process. There was a significant amount of input from the public that helped shape the committee's contents. And finally, I would like to thank Todd and his team for their hard work under what was, to say the least, unusual and unexpected circumstances as we dealt with the pandemic and trying to get this report done at the same time. So having said that as an opening, Todd, I'll turn it over to you to make a presentation to council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to start by noting and appreciating the resilience and the grit of the Selwyn team as they proceeded to execute this review while simultaneously dealing with the realities of the COVID-19 state of emergency. Spoke very well to the determination of your staff team and the determination of council and the committee to continue to work hard for taxpayers. I've dispensed with the normal sort of PowerPoint rigmarole, recognizing that council members have received the report, and I thought I would keep it simple and keep the focus on the report itself. I want to make some brief comments first around process, then around deliverables that were expected from the work, then a quick synopsis of the sort of the change plan that's built into the report, and then some very brief comments on implementation. So from a process point of view, obviously we worked through the committee. The deputy mayor, it sounds like, is going to have some comments about the work of the committee. Like the mayor, I want to acknowledge and recognize, and we appreciated the cooperation of staff through the exercise in terms of providing us with necessary factual information about processes and financial data. That being said, the recommendations in the report are the recommendations of Performance Concepts Consulting. And we will, from an accountability point of view, we are happy to live with those recommendations. Those are not staff recommendations, they're the third-party recommendations from our team. From a process point of view, of course, the mayor made note of the fact that public consultation was important. It was certainly a complicated process. We were on the cusp of public consultation plan A in person, talking like normal human beings, when the curtain came down with the COVID-19 pandemic and the state of emergency. But with the help of staff and the committee, we were nimble enough to transfer to an online delivery model, and we were able to use internet surveys of planning and building application applicants while protecting their anonymity and their privacy. We were nonetheless able to execute surveys that had upwards of 150 responses from one-time planning and building permit application applicants. We were also able to hold certainly a smaller, for lack of a better term, repeat applicant building and construction industry online roundtable as well, with the kind of stakeholders that make their living in the planning, building, construction industry. So we had lots of great input come from those exercises, and in fact we've properly documented them, and they are part of the technical appendix to this report, the findings from those survey exercises, and they have certainly informed our findings and recommendations. Deliverables included as per the RFP that we were retained under, a cost recovery comparative analysis of planning and building fees versus a series of local and broader provincial municipal comparators, both planning and building fees, the development of a set of key performance indicators that could be used by the municipality to set performance targets for processing applications and measuring actual results against those targets. We developed a how-to primer that could be useful to applicants as they think of this development approvals journey, which can feel daunting and complicated to applicants, both those familiar with the process and those perhaps only ever going through it once. We feel that document will be a useful resource moving forward. We did a technology review looking at the IT tools that can leverage improved performance, ranging from internet portals for creating applications online to progress tracking tools so that applicants and staff can understand the rate of progress in processing applications as we move forward. All of these deliverables are reflected in the report itself. And specifically, the recommendations in the report fall into some families or some themes. And based on work that my firm has done around the province, we think that there's this sequence that we have to understand where in the development approvals process, we first look at resources, fees, if you will, to make sure we have the fuel to get the work done without unduly burdening taxpayers. And when we have sustainable fee packages for both planning and building, we can move on to resources, the muscle, if you will, that executes the work. Proper fees are the fuel hires the muscle. And we looked at the questions of sufficient resources. Do we have them? How do we want to deploy them? Is there a need for a strategic insertion of a resource, which we determined there was? And then on into processes. So the fees are the fuel, the resources, the staff are the muscle, the processes are the way we get the work done. And we have looked at that as well to try and streamline processes within planning, within building, and importantly between the two, recognizing that there's often a handoff when an applicant needs to go through a planning process. We want to make sure that we have an efficient handoff into the building permit process, which of course is where applicants eventually want to get to. They want to get their projects constructed. And so we've had a hard look at process as well, and the important role that technology can play in adding discipline to the processes that we use to execute the work. When we take all of this together, it resulted in a series of findings and recommendations. I believe there were 23 complete encompassing recommendations in the report, calls to action. These recommendations have been marshaled into a plan, a do now, a do soon, and a do later, potentially, implementation sequence. The do now and the do soon implementation portions of the recommended roadmap would occur over a 2-year period. In recommending the 2-year period, we have tried to balance the fact that, you know, we want to be aggressive on implementation, but we don't want to create implementation overload so that the municipality can go about this in an aggressive and deliberate way. And we think that 2-year focus is an appropriate amount of time. As was mentioned by the mayor, we at the committee, there was a discussion about a mid-implementation progress checkup. We know lots of things will happen between now and the end of the 2-year implementation period, and a midpoint checkup, I concur with the committee, will be a useful way of making sure that we have been relentless and focused around implementation, because it would be a tragedy of the first order for the committee and staff and our team to have done all this work and then to fail on implementation. So recognizing implementation failure is not an option. The midpoint assessment makes a lot of sense to performance concepts. And so we're fully supportive of that step should council decide that that's an appropriate thing to do. The particular recommendations themselves, I'm not going to burden council with going through them one by one. I recognize you've had the report and have had a chance to read them. So in the interest of time, what I would suggest is, when you think it's appropriate, and if you have any questions or clarifications about individual recommendations, I am certainly able to throw them up on the screen and speak to them in whatever fashion council feels is necessary. But as I mentioned, they fall into these themes of the fuel, the muscle, and then the process, and finally onto implementation. So with my long-winded summary sort of coming to an end here, I'll perhaps, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you, and I'm serving at the pleasure of council here to answer any questions or present any clarifications that are required.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Just before I go to the 3 councillors who were not part of the committee, I'll just ask Sherry if there's anything she wanted to add about process.
I think it is important for council to recognize that it was quite a long process. Council knows that the Building and Planning Committee has been meeting for several months now and comprised of several members of the community, including the mayor and myself, and has been supported by staff, as Andy has said. We've had meetings with Todd and Bruce individually in some cases, and pre-COVID meetings at the office to discuss any issues. After COVID, we have been Zoom meeting with them. The committee asked questions, provided input, and the consultants provided clarification as to the recommendations. Suffice to say that the process has been committee-driven. Our finals, when we had our final Zoom meeting, the committee unanimously supported the recommendations that are before us today. So that's all I'd like to add right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sherry. So turning it over to councillors who were not on the committee, I'm going to ask Donna. I'll give you the floor to make any comments and or ask any questions of Todd.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate all this work, Todd, and the mayor and the deputy mayor, staff, and the members of the public that were on this committee. They have done a lot of work over the years, the committee, and I think this is a culmination of it. And it identifies a lot of ways that I think we can improve our building and planning services. My big concern, and I think something that we have to act on very quickly, is our chief building officer. He's way overworked. He doesn't have enough staff at his disposal right now. And I would really like to push forward this new hire as fast as we could, because I'm afraid for his health and well-being. So that was one of the recommendations that I think is very important. I know the software is important as well. And the changing in our charging fees, which I really like. I never really understood the so many dollars for every $1,000 worth of value. I wondered if you were 76,000, if you had to pay another $1,000. I just didn't ever really understand how that was calculated. So the value per square foot makes a lot of sense to me. I think those are my highlights.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Appreciate that. Todd, did you want to respond to that, or?
I think the councillor's reference to the recommended staff position is a good opening to recognize that we don't casually do a review and just automatically assume, oh, we need more resources. So we carefully considered the value added of this position. And this position will be multidisciplinary. They will have technical knowledge on both the building and the planning side of the operation. They will be doing a lot of quality control screening at the counter, if you want to think of it that way, to make sure that we have complete, good quality applications. That in turn will protect your building inspectors and your senior planner from a productivity point of view to devote their technical knowledge to the important planning and building questions that they were hired to deal with. And so we will improve customer service because there will be a focused available resource there to help people at the counter. At the same time, we'll protect our processing capacity by making sure that our highly trained staff are not playing pinball back and forth between the counter and then attempting to refocus on a set of plans or attempting to refocus on the technical aspects of a planning application. So we think it's money well spent, and we are recommending that there would be a funding approach that would be 2/3 of the position initially paid for out of your building permit reserve, with the remainder of the position being funded from some combination of planning fees and or a relatively limited amount of property tax funding, and that you would decide in your budget process for 2021 or before what would be appropriate from that point of view. So again, it's a new position, but it's growth being paid for by growth for the most part. And it was important for us that we get the revenue solution for that position correct. As for the new building fee, this is a move that will bring you into conformity with the general trend in the province to a square footage based fee. It's easier to administer. We're not having the great debate at the counter about what the real construction value of a property is when applicant A comes forward and says this house is going to cost $600,000 and applicant B says it's going to cost $450,000, and they're within 100 square feet of each other, we no longer have to play that brokerage game about what appropriate construction values are. And it's very much a best practice associated with the rest of the province. So it's pretty uncontroversial, and it should be a relatively straightforward fix to make sure that that fee can be restructured on a revenue neutral basis.
Thank you, Todd. Anita?
Sorry, I had to figure out how to unmute myself. I'd like to echo what Donna was saying, all the points that she made. Thank you so much to the committee, the staff, and all the folks that were involved in answering surveys and being involved in phone interviews. It's a really fulsome and exhaustive report. Lots of good recommendations, and I understand what you're saying with regards to the staffing component. I think when we look at our township and the value of the building permits and the number of building permits, we're not going backwards. It's just we seem to be continually growing each quarter from what I can see from our reports. The question that I do have a question, that's with regards to the planning fees cost recovery. It says current cost recovery hovers around 45%. Therefore, existing taxpayers are paying a majority share of Selwyn's development processing costs. Can you explain what that's about?
Sure. So the planning approvals process really has, if you want to think of it this way, two clients. Client number one is the applicant. The applicant, of course, should be expected to pay an appropriate share of the costs for a decision that the applicant is going to derive some benefit from. And the economic benefit derived with some of those application categories can be considerable. But the planning process also protects the interests of the established community, think of it as existing development, in making sure that you're building the community that they want to live in, that it has the amenities, that it has the urban design and the livable feel that residents want. So it's appropriate for both applicants and existing development, i.e. taxpayers, to share the costs of a development application. Now, in most of the growth areas of the province, municipal councils have decided that that sharing should not be even, that the primary beneficiary is the applicant. And so in Greater Toronto, in the big greenfield municipalities, applicants are probably paying 75% of the costs of most of their major planning applications. We're not suggesting that, but we're suggesting there is room to move forward to rebalance the cost sharing in Selwyn between applicants and existing taxpayers. And that moving beyond 50% is certainly, it seems to us, an appropriate and good idea. And in fact, we're recommending sort of a 3-year phase-in to try and get closer to something like 2/3 of the cost borne by applicants. That will reduce the property tax pressure, and we believe it will accurately reflect the relative benefits to applicants and to existing development. And so we're suggesting a phased approach. The building side, we already have what we think of as an enterprise cost recovery model. 100% of our processing costs are already recovered on the building side. In fact, you've been fortunate enough that you've also been able to accumulate a significant building permit revenue surplus in that reserve. And that reserve will stand you in good stead during a time like right now, when perhaps the flow of development volumes have been interrupted by this little thing called the world pandemic. And as revenues perhaps take a dip, we nonetheless have the money to carry our processing, our staff processing resources across that dip, across even a full recession, and come out the other side ready to process development in a timely fashion on the far side of the dip. So it's prudent that you have a reserve. The reserve is very large. And in fact, the reserve is an appropriate source of funding for both this position and for some of the IT investments in modern IT tools that you're going to make. And when it comes to building fees, we're recommending that you take a break on adjusting those fees for a 3-year period and make some of these investments. In doing so, you'll bring that reserve balance down to a more sustainable, more expected level of balance, and but still reinvest in the development approvals process. So that's sort of the gist of the revenue recommendations that we're making.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Todd, nice to see you again. I don't know if you remember me or not. I was the bull of the China shop. So this report, I think, has checked all the boxes. It's everything we've been hearing. So I think the committee and the people who you folks have reached out to and the list we got, I think we're right. The right combination, because it's all there. I'm not going to go over a whack of it, but I've just got a couple questions. 2 questions on recommendation 13. It's regarding the journey, and that's an excellent document. It steps everybody through, because not everybody's as fluent as, you know, Rob or Jeanette or whoever's in the office. But I thought we were already doing something similar to that. Is that a tweak on our pre-consultation, or is this a completely new document that you folks have suggested that we use? My other question, and I don't know if you want to answer that before I ask my other question.
Happy to respond, Councillor. So the journey document, if you will, if you think of it as a primer, it's a new document, and what it's attempting to do is to support a bewildered applicant who has a real life and isn't necessarily familiar with all of the winding complexities of the development approvals process. And it's a document that's designed to say, you know, this is how it works. Here are the rules, and here's who sets them. Here are the players that are going to be part of your journey. And here are the instruments, the boxes you're going to have to check off to get to your end objective, which is your constructed project of some sort. And we take them through the planning world piece of that journey. We move them through the building world piece of that journey, because they're 2 separate sets of rules, 2 different groups of players, and a whole different set of instruments in each. And we're hoping that this gives them the bird's eye view of the journey they're going to take. I believe that that document could be interesting and useful, for instance, at the pre-consultation phase. When an applicant comes into pre-consultation and says, I don't know what the heck this journey is looking like. Help me understand, you know, the hills I'm going to have to push the rock up to get to where I want to be. So I think that is a useful tool. I could see that tool being available online for applicants to access as part of their support toolkit. I could see, you know, 12 copies of it behind the counter, and when someone comes in, you know, the new permit tech pulls a version out, highlights with a yellow highlighter, this piece, and this piece are the pieces that you need to know about for your minor variance, or these are the paragraphs and the places you should read and think about when it comes to your rezoning. So I think that document could be very helpful for the one-timers, the people that are only going to do this once and, you know, are a little bit lost, as any of us would be. And this gives them the roadmap for moving forward.
Yeah, because it's certainly a daunting process for people who don't do it every day. And then, you know, our people may talk at a level above their head because that's their job and that's what they're used to. This kind of dumbs it down. So I think that's good. And them talking above the head through no fault of theirs, that's just their job. So it's natural for anybody to you know, maybe not explain it in layman's terms. The other question I've got is on point 10, enhanced customer service. I'm a customer service oriented guy. My business is solely customer service. Without it, I've got nothing. I've got questions on customer service training. I don't know how you train customer service. Customer service to me is trained at home when you were 7, 8, 9, 4 years old, whatever. You've either got the skill set to be a good person or you've got the set to not be it's cut and dry. I don't know how you train customer service. Can you enlighten me on that?
Well, so let's talk about culture for a minute. And as in my travels around the province and the country doing development approvals reviews, the cultural challenge that many stakeholders identify in many different places, many different jurisdictions, is municipal staff, who are regulators after all, are very good at explaining the requirements that I have to meet, and are very good in telling me when I have not yet met them. That's sort of just being a competent regulator. What we're hoping for from a customer service point of view, of course, is that we can go a step further, that merely informing you about no is not enough. We want to advise and help you get to yes. In other words, where there are elements of interpretation, we want to be flexible enough that we are still a viable regulator. We're not interested in building buildings that fall down. That's not our job. And we're never going to be just the township that builds buildings that fall down. So standards are going to have to be met, but there is interpretation and there is advice that we can give. And we never want to be the municipality that says, that's no, go figure it out. We want to be the municipality that says, here are the steps you need to take or consider in getting to yes. And while our staff can't act as their consultant, we can certainly act as their ally in getting good development to yes. And so I'm an optimist when it comes to people's lifelong learning. Maybe we have a bit of a different point of view about this. I have to be an optimist on this question, that my clients across the country can mold a culture where the expectation is that we will help people get to yes. And that's the kind of customer training I'm talking about, is informing our staff team about our expectations about getting to yes, making it clear that simply getting to no is not the entire job, and giving them the tools, whether they be training tools around negotiation, around conflict mediation. There's lots of tools that I could imagine that could be part of a viable customer service training package to get us to where we want to be. And one of the things we did here, it's concerning, is that that some of the stakeholders feel that we've got a ways to go between being very competent about getting to no and helping people get to yes. And those messages were nuanced about, and there were plenty of examples of, we've got a lot to build on, with plenty of examples of where we're helping people get to yes, but we also heard plenty of examples about where we're not. And so there's work to be done there. It's clear from the feedback we got. And the customer service training, which should be customized and carefully considered, that's what it would be about. And I don't believe it's a lost cause. I believe lifelong learning can help us all change and grow as professionals, and including me. And it's my hope that training will inform the determination of the municipality to move forward with that customer service-based culture.
Okay, thank you, because again, it was the training part I was looking for the clarification. Now you hit the nail on the head with how do you get to yes. It's in the report a couple times, so obviously you heard it loud and clear, and I may have even referenced that during our meeting too, that the object is to get to yes. So that's what I had as far as questions. I do thank you for the report. I've done an outstanding job, and yeah, I look forward to the implementation. Thanks, Todd.
Thank you, Jerry. Just before I get to Sherry, did you have a follow-up on that point, Donna?
Yes, thank you. I just was looking at my notes again, Todd, and I see that I highlighted what Jerry was talking about, and I've written customer service culture, and then I wrote two-track storyline for development approvals. And I just wondered what you meant by the two-track storyline for development approval.
Let me speak to that, Councillor. So when we did our survey of the one-time applicants, when it came to their feedback, the large pool of one-time applicants were relatively satisfied. I will say the building applicants were relatively satisfied with their experience. The planning applicants were a little less clear-cut. And then there was a marked contrast with our repeat customers, the repeat customers that make their living in the business and have ongoing, imperfect relationships, working relationships with staff as they move forward. And that group is the group that emphasized the need for a bit of a culture reset. And so the two tracks, it's interesting that the relatively straightforward needs of the relatively simple applicant requirements are being met. And it's the ongoing relationship where there seems to be occasionally some sandpaper and sometimes a lack of cohesion moving forward. And so the two tracks were both planning versus building, as well as, the repeat veteran customers who think they know how the process should work versus the one-timer customers who were sort of dependent on staff to get them through it. So it was it's a nuanced picture, not black and white, not all good or all bad, but there's some nuance to the picture, and there is an opportunity to recognize some solid performance as well as an opportunity to improve performance.
Thank you. And I just have one other thing, Mr. Mayor, that I forgot to mention, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I also found, I really liked the statement that you indicated that there should be a different set of rules for urban versus rural development. I think we've heard a lot about that, especially paid parking has been a huge issue in some of our rural developments. So I would like that to be considered as well, for sure, because that has been a major issue for us.
And Councillor, my recommendation there speaks directly to council. And that recommendation starts with a policy decision that council can make to say, we are going to have two different sets of development expectations inside our, sort of our designated growth zone versus the rest of the municipality. And I'm confident that staff can follow where council leads in deciding that that is appropriate, with coming up with some good technical definitions of, which land falls into which zone, if I can put it that way. But certainly we heard loud and clear from a number of stakeholders that when you're driving down a gravel road and you're arriving at a paved parking lot on a site plan, it's cause for concern. And I think this represents a sort of a technically viable way forward. And council will have the opportunity to lead on that.
Okay, I just have my notes here and I'm not looking in your document. So when did you suggest that we move on that issue? Do you recall?
I'm pulling up the recommendation on my screen as we speak so that I get this right. It's always good to get it right.
Sorry, my phone's ringing.
Yes. So I'm suggesting that, so let me read the recommendation. Council should address township staff to bring forward a report to set out growth and non-growth catchment areas for site plan approvals. It should codify growth area service standards such as paved parking and other appropriate amenities, and that should happen no later than Q1 2021.
What recommendation was that?
That's recommendation number 16.
Okay.
So within the next year.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Donna. So Sherry, if you want to make some comments on the report, and then I think you have a motion that you want to move as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, through you. I too want to take the opportunity to thank the consultants, Todd and Bruce, for the comprehensive review our Building and Planning Committee members for their input and work on the committee, and to thank staff for their support. The majority of the work was done under trying conditions, as you've already mentioned, but I feel there was sufficient public input to provide the recommendations that we have been given. I feel strongly about all the recommendations. To me, they are of equal value in seeing them implemented. I recognize that there's a lot of work ahead to implement these recommendations, and I feel it's imperative that they be completed this term. Having the e-permitting available sooner rather than later will provide help to the department and to our customers. I look forward to receiving the implementation plan from staff so we can proceed, and I think it would be a good idea to bring in a third party to assess our progress made after 1 year, as was recommended to council by the Building and Planning Committee. So my motion, I believe Tanya has a copy of it, if she can put it up on the screen.
Tanya, if you're able to do that.
I'm just putting it up right now. Just give me one moment.
Nope, I can see
It's
it.
visible.
There.
Very good.
So do you want me to read it, Mr. Mayor, for the benefit of people who may not be,
Yep.
be listening in?
Yeah, it's fairly short. Go ahead.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Sherry Senes and seconded by Councillor Jerry Herron, that the report from Performance Concepts Consulting be received and its recommendations be endorsed in principle, and that the staff proceed with recommendation number 5 as soon as possible through the implementation and configuration of the Central Square Technologies Diamond Municipal Solutions e-permitting software and virtual hall module, with the cost of this project to be funded by the Building Inspection Contingency Reserve, and that the Building and Planning Committee's recommendations for a third-party review of progress of implementation after 1 year be adopted, and that staff develop and bring back an implementation plan to be completed within the proposed 2-year time frame, including sources of funding for the recommendations outlined in the Building and Planning Services Review, and that a special meeting of council be scheduled in September, hopefully early September, to receive and address the implementation plan. That's the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Herron, do you second that?
Yeah, I'll second that with a brief comment, if I could, Mr. Mayor. That this is hugely important. We've all heard it loud and clear. We've gone forward with the report, with the recommendations. I think it's important that we get this done. Short of tax revenue, this is our biggest generator of revenue that we have. So we have to make sure it's running right. We have to make sure it's running smooth. And I think this is a great exercise that we've gone through to make things better. Now, I get Robert's going to have a ton of work, and I feel bad for Robert because, you know, he's got a big job to begin with, let alone throwing this in. But I think with the teamwork on the staff level and with council, I think we can get through this. One recommendation, though, I would make, Sherry, when reading the thing, let's just call it the Square instead of Central Square Technologies Diamond Municipal Solution Marmalade. I'm going with the Square.
I'm not sure if that's the right name for it, though. This was presented by staff, that particular part of the recommendation.
Yeah, I think we'll use that as the formal one, but as a way of referring it to it in the future, we can utilize the nickname. But for the purposes of the resolution, we'll use this name. So. But yeah, it is a handful to say each time. So we need to find an acronym for it. So good. So we have a mover and we have a seconder. Sherry, did you want to add anything else in terms of comments?
No, I think everything's reflected in the motion. I'm really looking forward to see the implementation, and if there's anything that council can do to help staff to move it forward, I believe we're all there for our staff.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Just before I I ask if there's any additional comments from the other councillors. I'm just going to add my 2 cents about the content of the report. I believe it is a solid report built on evidence. It did a good examination of what we are doing. It got input from users of the system, and I think that was critical. Our consultants had a good knowledge of best practices from across the province and incorporated them, and had a solid understanding of the regulatory and legislative framework that we have to operate within. And I think all of that put together allowed for a good report to be put forward. I believe the report encourages the township to strike the correct balance between customer service, appropriate risk tolerance, and the need to ensure development occurs in the right place at the right time in the right way. The report outlines a path forward that will help our community grow and be able to accommodate the needs of a diverse population, including meeting the life cycle housing needs emerging in Selwyn Township. The report recognizes what we do well and outlines key steps we can take to meet the challenges faced by building and planning in the third decade of the 21st century. It provides steps on how to use our building and planning revenue to enhance our human and technological resources in a manner that enhances our development and planning process and provides increased accountability and transparency. The report's recommendations suggest modification in 5 key areas. Fee modernization and cost recovery, specifically more effective use of our reserves. Enhanced and improved business practices, moving forward with applications on a sequential rather than a concurrent basis. Key investments in staff, expanding and reorganizing our staff to meet client volumes. Enhancing the tools that we have, using IT to enhance customer service and better monitor our performance. And finally, as was mentioned many times, fostering a customer service culture. Striving to find a way to get to yes, while understanding occasionally the answer may be no. I largely support the recommendations in the report. I support the motion that was put forward, and I too look forward to working with staff as we move to implement these recommendations over the balance of our term of council. So having said that, we have a mover, we have a seconder. Does Anita or Donna want to add anything before I call a vote on the motion?
Yes, I would like to add something, Mr. Mayor. Point number 3, when we suggest that after 1 year we have a review, I'm not sure we can put this in writing, but I would strongly recommend that we use performance concepts, because there would be no catch-up period. They know everything that there is to know about our building and planning department, and they could just start from not ground zero. They could start from wherever we are and move forward. So I hope that we can use Todd's company to do that review after 1 year's time.
I note that, Donna. We'll just need to make sure that we follow our procurement policy.
Yeah, I understand that. I just wanted to mention it.
Okay, good. I'll go to Anita first, and then I'll go to Sherry, who wants to intervene. Anita, did you have something that you wanted to add? I can't see the screen now. There you are. You just popped up.
Yeah. No, I just agree with I agree with what everybody is saying. I think it's an excellent report, and I think it's a huge project, but I think it's probably timely with the amount of development we have had in the past. And you know, if Lakefield South was to go forward in the near future or the not so near future, we really can use this report and all the recommendations. I think it'll be extremely beneficial in the long run.
Thank you, Anita. And just before I call the vote, Sherry, did you have a comment?
Yes, I'd like a recorded vote, please, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Madam Clerk, we have a request for a recorded vote. So I will ask you to conduct that.
Thank you. Mayor Mitchell?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor.
Sorry?
Sorry, Deputy Mayor Dennis,
Can hear it. Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Locke.
Yes.
Sorry, did I miss Councillor Valentine?
You did.
I'm sorry, Donna. Councillor Valentine.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you, colleagues. That motion is carried. That, I believe, concludes our agenda. I don't believe there is anything else that we need to deal with.
We just have the confirming bylaw, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I knew I'd forget something. I appreciate the help. So I need a motion for a confirming bylaw. Anita, seconded by Donna. All those in favor, show your hands. Okay, that's done. Todd, just before you leave, thank you very much, and we look forward to carrying out your recommendations. So
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been a pleasure and an honor to work for the township.
Thank you. I need a motion to adjourn then. Jerry, and seconded by Nita. All those in favor. We adjourn, colleagues. Just before you leave the meeting, we're reassembling in about 50 minutes for the Committee of Adjustment meeting. I'm going to call a short break after the Committee of Adjustment meeting, or I will wait for a few minutes after the Committee of Adjustment meeting before bringing back council. We do have 3 statutory public meetings during our council meeting, so we may end up having to start, depending on how long the Committee of Adjustment takes and what will likely be a 10-minute gap. So we may have to start with the public meeting portion of our agenda and then return to a delegation. So just letting you know that. But we've got a bit of a break here before meeting number 2 of 4 starts at 5 o'clock. So thank you, colleagues, and we'll see you in a few minutes.